everyone, welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump says NVIDIA and other US chip makers can sell their advanced H200 chips to approved customers in China after months of pressure from industry leaders. He says the move protects national security and jobs, while NVIDIA welcomes the decision amid ongoing US-China tech tension. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Japan's claim that Chinese fighter jets targeted radar on Japanese aircraft is completely unacceptable. Japan calls the encounter dangerous, while China accuses Tokyo of repeatedly approaching and disrupting its navy during training. Japan lifts tsunami warnings after a 7.5 magnitude quake injures at least 30 people and forces around 90,000 to evacuate in the northeast. Small waves were recorded, power is back on, and authorities warn the risk of a major aftershock remains high for a week. Billionaire and Trump ally Andrej Babis has been appointed as the Czech Prime Minister, signaling possible cuts to Ukraine and tense European Union relations. President Peter Pavel named him after his party won October's election. Israel says its forces struck Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon, including a Radwan training compound, military structures and a launch site. The strike comes days after both countries sent civilian envoys to a ceasefire monitoring committee. Russian drone attacks hit Sumy for a second time in 24 hours, with more than 10 strikes in half an hour, knocking out power across the city. Authorities say critical infrastructure is running on reserve as the region copes with the blackout. Honduran candidate Salvador Nasrallah accuses rival Nasri Asfara, backed by President Trump, of stealing the election, as Asfara holds a narrow lead. Nasrallah claims system failures and manipulation occurred as ballots favoring him were being counted. European Union climate monitors say 2025 is on track to tie 2023 as the second hottest year ever recorded, following 2024's record heat. Global temperatures from January to November were 1.48 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And viewers, let's start with the top focus. Now, Hamas official has stated that the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire cannot move forward until Israel halts what it calls violations of the agreement. Hossam Badran, a member of the Hamas's political bureau, told Fars that the ceasefire, which began on October 10, will not progress as long as Israel continues to evade its commitments. Badran called on mediators to pressure Israel to honor the terms of the truce. The second phase of the ceasefire is supposed to involve the deployment of an international force and disarmament of Hamas. However, this phase cannot begin until Hamas completes the handover of all hostages, though it still holds the body of one hostage, Ran Chewili, claiming it has been unable to locate him. While Israel has carried out airstrikes in Gaza, it maintains that these actions were retaliatory, targeting militants who attacked Israeli troops stationed along the Yellow Line, a position the Israeli Defense Forces withdrew from at the start of the truce. In a separate development, Israel announced that it will reopen the Allenby Crossing, which connects the occupied West Bank with Jordan, to allow humanitarian aid trucks to reach Gaza. This marks the first time since late September that aid from Jordan will be permitted to enter Gaza. Israeli officials stated that all trucks will undergo security inspections and be escorted to ensure safety. The reopening of the border crossing comes as part of broader efforts to address humanitarian needs in Gaza amid ongoing conflict. And Professor Ephraim Inbar, who is a senior researcher at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, is now joining us live from Jerusalem. I extend you a very warm welcome and thank you, sir, for joining us here at NewsX World. Who do you think is supporting Hamas in this fight? How does it have the tenacity to issue statements of this regard when nobody really wants Hamas there?
It is quite clear that there is a Sunni axis, radical axis in the Middle East, which is contains Turkey, a very strong country, that the leader of the country, Mr. Erdogan, is basically a Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is also an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Turkey is backed financially by Qatar, who espouses the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, propagates it through its very loud and vocal Al Jazeera network. And this is why Hamas is willing to oppose the Trump plan that makes it quite clear that Hamas has to disarm. And this is also the international understanding that Hamas must go.
And how is the aid that's being dispatched, how is that going to go through?
Well, it's first of all, part of it goes to the area that is occupied by and is ruled by Hamas. And in this area, simply Hamas takes over all the humanitarian support, and they sell it. They make a fortune from the humanitarian aid that is provided by many countries. There is another area where humanitarian support is going. This is the area controlled by Israel. And there, of course, dispersion of this humanitarian aid is working rather well.
All right. Thank you, Professor Inbar, for joining us and helping us with your perspective there. And with that, we're going to move on to news on China. Now, China has welcomed the U.S. approval for NVIDIA to sell its H200 chips to Chinese customers. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiakun said on Tuesday that Beijing has always advocated for cooperation with the United States based on mutual benefit and win-win outcomes. The statement came after U.S. President Donald Trump gave the green light for the chip sales, highlighting ongoing efforts to maintain technological and economic engagement between the two nations. Officials in Beijing say that continued cooperation and dialogue remain key to avoiding friction and promoting stability in China-U.S. relations. Let's listen in.
我们注意到有关报道，中方一贯主张，中美通过合作实现互利共赢。
And it seems like a win-win situation for the China and the U.S. as in now China has welcomed the U.S. approval for the NVIDIA chips to be sold to the Chinese customers. Now remember, the statement is coming after President Trump has greenlit the chip sales. And now joining us in this bulletin is editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, Madhav Nalapit. Thank you, Mr. Nalapit, for joining us here at NewsX World. How do you see this development with the US approving the sale of H200 NVIDIA chips to China? Of course, trade relation between the two countries improving, also a win-win for all parties involved, including NVIDIA.
Well, if you ask me, it's an act of suicide on the part of the United States. The fact of the matter is the Chinese are masters at copycatting technology, and will be some of the fastest chips ever on the planet. And frankly, the fact that they're being allowed to be exported to China will enable the industry in China to outstrip that of the United States in a matter of maybe less than 3 years. So frankly, it's economic suicide that the US is committing by selling these chips to China. It's purely for sake of money, but for sake of money, You should not sell your national interest. You should not sell the long-term future of the American people because joblessness is going to rise, companies are going to fold up, and technology companies will be very heavily hit. In my view, NVIDIA should not do this, and I would like to say President Trump should ensure that this kind of thing does not happen.
So, if you think it's a suicide for the US, what do you think has prompted Trump to give an okay to the sale of NVIDIA chips?
Look, as I told you, I am at a loss to understand the new Donald Trump. I can understand the old Donald Trump 1.0. Donald Trump for the first 4 months of his presidency. After that, he became increasingly erratic. He has lost his compass, and the compass was very clear. It was pointing towards the main threat, that's from China. And now what does the national security strategy say? That China is a close peer of the US. That's the whole problem. If China becomes a peer of the US, at the end of the US dollar's dominance, at the end of much of the US economy, it'll surge joblessness. It is a very short-term fix and long-term suicide. It's like taking a dose of cocaine. You have a short-term fix, and then you have over the long run. If you're a cocaine addict, you're in really bad shape, critical terminal shape. So this is utterly incomprehensible from the point of view of long-term, medium-term U.S. interests, and incomprehensible from anything except getting money now, even at the cost of your national interest.
Professor Nalapit, how much do you think is China going to gain from access to the powerful chips?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that question.
How much is China going to gain from the access to these chips?
The Chinese will gain a lot. Because they have gone very far into mastering almost any technology, and where they could not get technology, they have stolen it. And that's why the Chinese students were sent back to China, even under the Biden administration, because they were found, especially high-tech students and high-tech people who are working in high-tech industry, were sent back precisely because China is a peer competitor of the United States. And I mean, they talk about win-win outcomes and things like that. For Chinese, win-win outcome is win for China, and is a loss for the other party. So this is a lose-lose outcome for the United States. And I'm really shocked that this has been allowed. I'm really shocked that Donald Trump is regarding India and Thailand, for example, I mean, as greater threats than China. It's utterly inexplicable what's happening to him.
All right. Thank you for your comment there. But regardless of our opinions, the NVIDIA shares rose up this morning. And to stay on with us, Mr. Nalapit, there's some more news coming in. Now, viewers, Lithuania's government has declared a state of emergency in response to balloons from Belarus that have disrupted aviation. The government has also asked Parliament to authorize the military to work alongside police and border guards in managing the situation. If Parliament approves, the military will be granted powers to restrict access to certain areas, conduct searches of vehicles and individuals, and detain those suspected of crimes or resisting authorities. The ongoing balloon incidents, which have caused multiple closures of Vilnius airport, are believed by Lithuania to be a part of a hybrid attack by Belarus, allegedly involving smugglers using the balloons to transport cigarettes. Belarus has denied any involvement in the balloon operation and has instead accused Lithuania of provocations, including the alleged use of a drone to drop extremist material, a claim that Lithuania denies. Let's listen into what the Lithuanian Interior Minister has said.
Vienas esminių privalumų paskelbus ekstremaliąją situaciją sąveikos su Lietuvos kariuomenė didinimas. Galiojant ekstremaliai situacijai, kariams gali būti suteikiamos specialiosios teisės, dėl ko jų veikimas kartu su Vidaus reikalų ministerijos tarnybomis, o taip pat ir savarankiškai tampa efektyvesnis. Legalizuojamas kariuomenės dalyvavimas ir specialiųjų įgaliojimų taikymas neutralizuojant oro erdvės pažeidimą.
And I now request Mr. Nalapat to join us back into the discussion here. Mr. Nalapat, now there are claims that these balloons were only carrying cigarettes or narcotics. Given that being the case, do you think the reaction by the government of Lithuania is a rather knee-jerk one?
Well, I can say it's an extreme overreaction, declaring a state of emergency for some reason that shooting down a balloon is child play. It's the easiest thing in the world.
Absolutely.
It's much easier than shooting down an aircraft, very much easier than shooting down a missile. Shooting down a balloon is it can be done even from your backyard using an improvised, devices. So quite frankly, declaring a state of emergency is absurd. They should shoot it down if they got any suspicion about it. And once 3 or 4 fall down, they can see for themselves whether they're really, dangerous substances or whatever is being carried there, or they're just, balloons. A lot of youngsters float balloons, and they do so as a hobby, as a sport almost. So quite frankly, I think it's a terrible overreaction on their part, and I think it shows the state of panic. I think it shows that there's kind of a paranoia there, that they'll soon be at war with the Russian Federation. Well, quite frankly, all the European states are provoking the Russian Federation very, very much, thanks to this, the way they are arming and equipping Ukraine to carry out deadly attacks deep into Russia. So the fact of the matter is, I think it's a terrible overreaction. And frankly, you keep declaring emergency for something like this, then when you actually have an emergency and you declare emergency, people will disregard and say, oh, that's just another one of those phony emergencies.
So would you agree with to the reaction that's coming from Belarus, that's accusing Lithuania of, making a mountain of a molehill and politicizing the situation thereon?
Look, the Lithuanians, frankly, they have acted in a manner which is a terrific overreaction, and I think the Belarusian authorities are perfectly justified in calling it an overreaction. Of course, one must bear in mind, Belarus is a security partner of Russia, and Putin and the Belarusian president are very close to each other, and there's no question about that. There's no question that the Russian missiles are there. The Belarus is being protected by the Russian armed forces, but the fact of the matter is something like a hot air balloon, for heaven's sake, reacting in this almost hysterical manner to hot air balloons. As I said, the problem is if you cry wolf too often, when the wolf really comes, nobody comes to your assistance, because they think, oh, just another fake cry. So I think I would warn Lithuania against that kind of thing. Take down many of these balloons, shoot them down, convince yourself what they carry, and they carry more, issue a formal démarche, go to United Nations and shoot down any balloon that crosses into your territory from Belarusian territory. But declaring an emergency is not needed. It is elementary national security, and surely the Belarusian military is capable of bringing down hot air balloons. Surely even they must be capable of bringing that down. As I said, it just shows the extreme level of paranoia in Europe, that they're soon going to be fighting with the Russian Federation on the ground.
But with Belarus denying these allegations of it sending these balloons, who do you think is doing that?
Look, I don't know the facts about the situation. I don't know if Belarus is correct or Lithuania is correct, but all I can say is it's an extreme overreaction on the part of Lithuania, and whether the Belarusians have not sent any balloons or not is not for me to say, but I don't have the facts. Only those on the ground there would have the facts, and they're not in the public domain as yet.
All right. Thank you for now, Mr. Nalapit, for joining us and helping us with your perspective there. And with that, viewers, we move on to some more news coming from Russia. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said that there is currently no dialogue with the United States on extending their nuclear arms control deal. He warns the outlook for renewing the New START treaty is bleak, with the pact set to expire next year in February. New START is the last remaining pact capping deployed strategic nuclear weapons after the INF treaty ended. Ryabkov says that talks are stalled because Washington wants a three-way format, including China, while Moscow insists Britain and France must also be at the table. He links any progress to a broader shift in US policy toward Russia, including the war in Ukraine and sanctions. Ryabkov says that Russia is ready to talk, but the clock is running down. And now moving on, viewers, an aide to President Emmanuel Macron has said that France provided logistical support and surveillance assistance to help the West African state of Benin thwart a coup attempt that was foiled at the weekend. The aide has said that Macron led a coordinated effort by speaking with key regional leaders, while France, at the request of the Beninese authorities, provided assistance in terms of surveillance observation and logistical support to the Benin armed forces. Benin has joined a growing list of African countries now where military officers have seized power since 2020. The military takeover lasted several hours on Sunday before officials announced it was foiled.